when you said, and I need to remind you, EPA had nothing at all to do with that. To be clear, you actually think the EPA had nothing to do with the crisis in Flint?
No.
Okay, Ms. Edmond, I have here in front of me Section 1431.
Yes.
It's the law. 1431 of the Safe Drinking Water Act, pulled from the EPA's website this morning, which describes the emergency powers authority given to the EPA in the event of an imminent, let me state that again, an imminent and substantial endangerment to public health. Do you believe the people of Flint have at any time faced an imminent or substantial endangerment to their health?
Yes.
Then, was this endangerment to the people of Flint not evident when the EPA learned of the high lead levels in June 2015?
Well, Section 1431 requires that there be both substantial endangerment and that the state fails or the city fails to take action.
Well, did they fail to take action?
Well,
I think the answer is yes. Don't you?
the legal advice that I got was that once the state had issued the order directing the city of Flint to implement corrosion control, and the mayor stepped forward to indicate that he would do so as soon as possible, that it was likely that the state of Michigan would argue that there was a jurisdictional bar.
Well, I mean, argument is one thing.
And
dealing with the job that you have is another thing.
Yeah,
the issue was, we had seen so far, the action wasn't being taken. Dr. Edwards and others, community members and others that we've all heard from, thankfully, they pressed it. It wasn't happening. Why didn't the EPA intervene and take control of the situation as soon as it learned of Flint water crisis? This is a crisis to human health. Dr. Edwards, do you think Ms. Hedman's response was adequate?
Completely unacceptable and criminal, frankly.
How soon should she have taken action according to law and according to human decency as well?
I don't know the law, but as a human being, she should have told people immediately.
Ms. Hedman, in July 2015, you told Flint's mayor to disregard Mr. Del Toro's preliminary memo that found high levels of lead in Flint's water supply. Why did it take another 5 months for the final report to come out?
I never told the mayor to disregard that memo. In fact, if you look at Appendix 3 to my testimony, you'll see what actually occurred during the conversation that I had with the mayor.
There's great dispute on that coming across the board.
Yes, I wrote the email, and I know what I said. And if we could take the time to take a moment to talk about that, I think we could clear that up.
I'm not sure we could. Mr. Del Toro certainly has a different recollection of it, as well as responses to him. And I had the opportunity to talk with him in Flint this Saturday as well. Very different from what we're being told here, and that's the concern. Again, the Human Decency Act, when the issue was brought to you by authorities in the field, by actual testing, the EPA didn't do what it needed to do, even if the other entities going down to the local level and the state level weren't doing their duty, and we are certainly going to ask them about those issues. And I look forward to their responses as well. Mr. Chairman, I see my time has expired. I yield back, and hopefully I can gain some other time from other individuals down the road.
I thank the gentleman, Mr. Walberg. We now recognize the gentlewoman from New York, Ms. Maloney, for 5 minutes.
The Flint drinking water crisis is a national scandal, and it cries out for accountability from those that are responsible. And that is what we are trying to accomplish today. I would like to begin with Mayor Walling. Mayor Walling, in Mr. Early's statement for this committee, He made several statements that specifically concerned the involvement of yourself and the City Council in the decision to switch to the Flint water. First, Mr. Early alleges, and I quote, "The concept of using the Flint River as an interim water source was inherent in the City Council's KWA Water Authority vote and Kurtz's March 2013 order," end quote. So Mayor Walling, at any time did the City Council ever vote on using the Flint River as an interim source of water?
No.
Now, Mr. Early never says that the City Council voted on this issue. Rather, he very clearly implies that somehow their vote to join the KWA Water Authority meant that they approved the use of the Flint River as an interim source. So Mayor Walling, in your prepared statement today before the committee, I quote, "The decision in June of 2013 to switch to the Flint River was contrary to the water plans and financial forecasts provided to me and the Flint City Council in March of 2013, end quote. I am going to put on the screen a document entitled Original Projection Summary Comparison, the KWA and DWSD K Water Authority to the Detroit Water Authority. And what's notable to me when you see this is a seamless movement. Never does this document mention the taking of water from the Flint River. Is that correct, Mr. Mayor?
That's correct.
And this was what was put before the City Council, is that correct?
That's right. That was March 2013.
And if I were a member of that City Council, I would think that was a seamless movement and that the Flint River was never touched and that the KWA and Detroit water would be what was there. Is that your interpretation of it?
That was what was provided in the documents. That's what took place in the City Council meeting, the comments that I and others made.
Now, Mr. Early also alleges that he, quote, delegated all day-to-day operational responsibilities of the Department of Planning and Development and the Department of Public Works to Mayor Walling as of June 2014, which notably is after the switchover. So, Mayor Walling, it appears to me that Mr. Early is attempting to deflect blame for this crisis onto you and to the City Council of Flint. What's your response to that?
I was surprised when this statement was first made. It was made through an op-ed, I believe, in October of 2015. And first of all, Mr. Early at the time was serving as city manager in the city of Saginaw. He was not serving in the city of Flint. I was, and I know what happened and what the process was. The first frequently asked questions that the city of Flint provided in early February of 2015, when so many of the issues came out about the TTHM crisis, was that the finance director and the city's public works director provided that recommendation to EFM Kurtz in June of 2013.
So in reality, to cut to the chase of it, who actually made the major decisions related to the water issues in Flint? Who made those decisions?
They were put in place by Emergency Financial Manager Kurtz in June of 2013. That included an adopted 2-year budget that set the equipment and purchasing and personnel for the Department of Public Works for the next 2 years. That's what Mr. Early later inherited.
And Mayor Walling, my time is up, but just would Mr. Farley have had the power, would Mr. Early have had the power to keep clean Detroit water flowing if he wanted to?
Yes, the emergency managers often amended the budgets that they were working with in consultation with the state.
And they had that power, not the City Council.
Thank
Correct.
the gentlewoman. We now recognize the gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Amash, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the panel for being here. Thank you especially to Professor Edwards, who's been an extremely valuable expert in this area. And I share your concerns about the EPA and its role and Ms. Hedman's role in this, and Mr. Wahlberg made many important points in that regard. I'm going to ask some questions to Mr. Early. Mr. Early, you wrote a column for the Detroit News in October 2015, is that correct?
That is correct, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to ask unanimous consent to enter this op-ed into the record.
Without objection, so ordered.
You've made clear here today and in your column that the decision to switch over to the Flint River was made by the previous emergency manager and the City Council, correct?
That is correct.
In your op-ed, you say it fell to me to oversee the implementation, correct?
That is correct.
Now, also in your op-ed, it says, it did not fall to me to question, second-guess, or invalidate the actions taken prior to my appointment. Do you really believe that?
I believe that based on the fact that there was no petition, there was no effort made to engage me to change what had already been implemented.
So, I'm sorry, so you believe, as an emergency manager, as someone who's put in charge of the city of Flint, it doesn't fall on you to question, second-guess, or invalidate any actions taken prior to your appointment?
No, what I mean by that is that it does not fall to me to arbitrarily change that, and that's what I was referring to.
Isn't the job of a city manager to question things? Mm-hmm. Isn't that why you're brought in?
That's part of the reason, yes.
If as a congressman, if I took the position that it's not my job to question, second-guess, or invalidate any actions that happened prior to my being here, would I be doing my job?
Well, if everybody were telling you that the project was on course and everything was going well, so there was nothing to second-guess.
So if Congress passes something in a previous term and I get elected, I'm just supposed to say, oh, well, everything's okay. I don't have any work here. Is that right?
What I'm saying is that you would obviously have to do your own due diligence, but if it comes up that there's nothing to change, there's nothing to change. And if people are telling you that the project is on course, keep in mind, that was only one of many projects in a distressed community that the emergency manager was responsible for.
So in your op-ed, you also say, at the time the decision was made, there was no way to predict such an unfortunate outcome. You also call it an unintended consequence with no blame to affix. So, as a person appointed in this position, or as an elected official like me, are we not supposed to concern ourselves with unintended consequences? We're just not supposed to think about those things?
No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that because of those unintended consequences, we now have what is known as the Flint water crisis. In hindsight, there's probably a lot more that everyone would have done, a lot more questioning everyone would have done. But when you have an 18-month window to turn around a distressed community going through its second round of state intervention, the object is to get the work done and enlist as many people as you can to assist you in getting that work done.
Isn't it your job to think about unintended consequences?
Well, we always think about the possibility of hypotheticals, absolutely.
And do you feel you did that in this case?
Well, I believe based on the information we were given, we acted responsibly and did what we did knowing the information we had at the time. Yes, sir.
All right. According to Michigan's emergency manager law, quote, upon appointment, an emergency manager shall act for and in the place and stead of the governing body and the office of chief administrative officer of the local government. Additionally, the emergency manager shall have broad powers to assure the local government's capacity to provide or cause to be provided as necessary governmental services essential to the public health, safety, and welfare. What, in your view, is the emergency manager's role in overseeing the daily duties of city employees?
Well, as I said earlier in my comments, as a city manager, I've always involved the elected and the appointed officials in the work that I do. And I did no different as the emergency manager in involving them because they're the experts. They're the ones that handle the day-to-day operations. So they were very much involved.
So when a city has an emergency manager, who's responsible for ensuring compliance with state and federal laws regarding safe drinking water?
Well, regarding anything, the emergency manager obviously is the person responsible for making sure that those things get done, and I've always accepted that.
So you take responsibility for that? Because in your op-ed, you say, the headline is, don't blame EM for Flint water disaster.
I'm trying to draw a distinction between responsibility and blame, sir. And we were all responsible by virtue of our roles. I was very responsible in my role as an emergency
What
manager.
role did you have, and what steps did you take in ensuring the Flint water treatment plant was prepared to meet state and federal drinking water standards, knowing that the Flint River would be the primary water source?
Well, we had regular meetings on the progress for upgrading the plant. As we got up to the switching over to the Flint water, I had regular meetings with the treatment staff. The mayor was a part of some regular meetings that we had. We all had discussions about the progress and the things that were being encountered in this switch. Once we made the switch and we got the complaints about the quality of the water, we went to the DEQ. We got boil water advisories, which are common in the case of treating water. We had meetings on a couple of occasions with the MDEQ to talk about what's going on and what is actually being treated. And let me again state for the record, in none of those meetings were the current issues that we're dealing with now a problem. They were not addressed. They were not issues brought to our attention. But we did everything we could to make sure we were being responsible to the complaints and the concerns about the quality of the water.
Yeah, I think responsibility involves paying attention to unintended consequences, thinking about what might happen. I see my time has expired. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I thank the gentleman. Will now recognize the gentlewoman from the District of Columbia, Ms. Norton, for 5 minutes.
I thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Edwards talked about willful blindness. I want to warn everybody about the willful blindness that's built into the separation of powers system, and that is why finger-pointing of the federal and the state side, either on this committee or among our witnesses, is quite inappropriate. Now, this committee has recognized this. To its credit, this committee passed in February, this past February, a bill, actually passed a law that requires the EPA to notify residents of high levels of lead when water samples show lead levels for the highest 10% of homes tested are above 15 parts per billion. Why do you think we needed a law? Because there is unusual deference on the part of federal officials. And apparently it took a law to say when people's lives are in danger, when their health is in danger, there's an obligation to speak up when the state isn't doing its part. Mr. Del Toro did speak up to his supervisors, but he risked being a whistleblower, and we know what happens to whistleblowers in our system. So my questions aren't aimed at finger-pointing. It is clear, though, that once you have the slightest evidence of lead in the water wherever you are in the system, you better speak up, because this is irreversible. You can't turn this one around, people. So I have a question for Mr. Early, recognizing the federal responsibility as well as the state responsibility, sir. But let's speak to your responsibility. You know, people are not crazy. They began to smell odors in the water. They saw the color of the Flint water change, and that started a month after the water plant began processing, this is during your watch, sir, the Flint water. Now, they began to speak out. They complained even about skin rashes and hair loss. Those complaints, it is our information, continued for 8 months while you were emergency manager of Flint. Did you ever consider, given those complaints, switching back to Detroit water once the public started to sicken and to speak out?
Well, let me just make again very clear that the fact of the complaints, we responded to those. We sent our water staff out and collected samples. But keep in mind, we were also working very closely with the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality on these issues. And while the water did have some discoloration, we were told a number of reasons for that, none of which raised the fact that the water was not fit for human consumption. We relied on the information we received from the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality as this was a manageable issue. And we did what we would.
Yeah, Mr. Early, you have extraordinary powers as an emergency manager. Was money ever a concern, or enough of a concern for you to ask the governor for state funds to reconnect to the Detroit water system during your time, during your watch?
Again, we were trying to manage the issue, and
And the smell of the water and the constant complaints were not enough of a warning for you to try to do something beyond rely on the experts. I mean, the experts seem to have been, Mr. Early, in the public, drinking the water.
Well, we relied on the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality, and we got the information from them. And
all right, Mr. Early, I'm sorry, my time is limited. Sue McCormick of Detroit Water wrote to you offering to continue supplying water to Flint, Michigan, until the Water Authority's project was complete. But you wrote back, there will be no need for Flint to continue purchasing water to serve its residents and businesses after April 17th, 2014. Why did you reject this offer to continue using Detroit water as a source?
Just to be clear, the letter that you referred to went to the city clerk at the time.
You had no knowledge of this letter?
I was not the emergency manager at the time that the letter came in. By the time I got there, we had already been notified that the contract had been terminated. What we could still...
But you were the emergency manager before the switch was implemented. On your watch, you could say, wait a minute, I'm in charge now. Wasn't this your job to look at what should be done now that you are in charge, sir?
We did look at that, and again, we followed the guidelines based on the information we were given. But importantly in that letter is that...
What about the warning that came? Now, imagine receiving a warning from somebody in the line who says, I have people above me making plans to distribute water as soon as possible. I'm reluctant to go, was reluctant to go before, but after looking at the monitoring schedule and current staffing, I do not anticipate giving the okay to begin sending this water out anytime. If any water is distributed from this plant in the next couple of weeks, it will be against my direction. What more did you need, Mr. Early?
That did not go to me, ma'am. That did not go to me. That email went to the director of the department, I do believe. It did not go to me.
Your name is on the letter, Mr. Early.
Oh, is that the one from... you're talking two different things.
And what's the other thing, sir?
Well, the letter from the MDEQ, I mean from the DWSD, and an email that came from one of the operators that talked about the distribution of water.
The gentlewoman's time has far expired. We'll now recognize the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Micah.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, I think this hearing is going to be known as the Great Finger Pointing hearing. And we've got Flint Mayor throwing people under the bus. We've got the Flint Emergency Manager throwing people under the bus. And we've got Ms. Hedman, former EPA administrator for that area, throwing people under the bus. But somewhere it seems like people were asleep at the tap, not doing their job. Now, if the locals failed, and the mayor failed, and the emergency managers failed, and there were failures there, Mr. Edwards, what role would the federal government have?
They're the last resort. They're the last line of defense. They're the last hope of Flint residents.
And the reason we put EPA together was to protect people, right, in cities and communities and states where they did not act to protect the water of the people, right?
That's correct.
Okay. Were they notified? Well, there's some heroes in this. First, the hero is, and she's here today, is Ms. Walters and her family, because they notified the local people and the federal people and everybody they could that they were poisoning their kids. Mr. Del Toro wrote an incredible memo. He acted. He's an Ms. Hedman, wasn't he an EPA official?
He's an EPA
Yeah,
scientist.
he did a great job.
Yes, he did.
A high schooler could read his memo, which he produced. Here's a copy of his memo, June 24th. It tells you the violations of the city. It tells you the incompetence. Then it tells you the poisoning of their children. It's documented. And all the steps and the violations of Flint are listed here. Not just this, but they have a history. They're listed on the back. A high schooler could read this and evaluate it. Now, you got that memo, right, Ms. Hedman?
I'm not sure when I got that memo.
Well, but
I
you got
did.
it, right? Okay, June. And Mayor, you were aware of this, and you two talked, didn't you? Did you talk to her about this memo?
Yes.
Mayor, you did talk to her. But, sir, I went back and checked to see if you talked to your constituent, the woman and family whose kids were being poisoned. We knew this early in 2015. We knew it. They knew it at the end of 2014. We had the test here that proved. And he went in and he tested the pipes. He did everything. The first they said it was the pipes were lead into the house. They weren't lead. They were plastic. They were PVC. There was no lead in there. So you told her at the library on March 31st you were aware of it. You went to Ms. Walters and told you were aware of the situation. You take care of it, right? You do anything. Didn't you tell that to your constituent?
Yes.
She showed up April 2nd, 2015 at your office, and they said you were gone for Easter, but they would be back with her on Monday, right? That's what they told her, I'm telling you, and that's what she told me. Today is what? 2016, March 15th. You haven't been back with her since. But you were aware of this memo. You read this memo. They tried to suppress this memo. This wasn't a pretty memo because it said your constituents were being poisoned. So this is an incredible failure, I believe, at all levels, particularly the federal level. That's our responsibility. When we get a memo like this from someone with the EPA doing their job, and a constituent who reports it, and we have the evidence of the poisoning. This Mr. Del Toro is a hero, and the things he did, every test possible. He conducted every test possible. Is that right? You read it, Mr. Edwards? Did you read this?
His memo's proven to be 100% accurate in every way, shape, and form.
And yet ignored at the local level, ignored at the emergency management level, and then the oversight. That's our responsibility. When all these levels fail, EPA. You never acted for what, 5 months after this memo, Ms. Hedman?
That's incorrect. In fact, the following day, I offered lead experts to the mayor.
What they did.
And within 3 weeks, we had concluded an agreement with MDEQ to order Flint to issue corrosion control.
And what did they do?
They issued an order.
Did they do it?
They did eventually.
Eventually, when?
They issued an order on August 17th directing the city of Flint to implement corrosion control.
And the time
on
is ticking and
September
nothing's
3rd.
done, and you never went back on them. There was really no plan in place for more than 5 months.
That's not true.
It was ignored. It is the whole truth and nothing but the truth, I hate to tell you. And again, I think EPA also failed. So we had failure at multiple levels. Mr. Edwards, you've seen cases. You said this isn't uncommon of how they failed across the country. Is that not the case in Flint?
Well, I mean, there's a climate out there where lead and water problems are covered up, that people are cheating on the sampling, and that climate allowed Flint to occur. It allowed these unethical civil servants at MDEQ to claim that there was no problem in the water whatsoever, even when they were breaking federal corrosion control law.
Thank you.
Thank the gentleman. Mr. Clay is recognized for his 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, there were numerous red flags that should have led the state to agree to return to the Detroit water system. Bacterial contamination in the water as early as summer 2014, the Legionella outbreak, the astronomical lead readings in Leanne Walters' home, all of these early signs should have been reason enough to consider returning to a safe water supply. But the response was always the same. It was not in the emergency manager's financial plan for the city to return to the Detroit water system. On January 9th, 2015, in response to concerns that had been raised about the safety of Flint's water, Mr. Early, you wrote, and I quote, "Suggestions have been made that the city of Flint should return to using water purchased through the Detroit Water and Sewage Department. For many reasons, financial and otherwise, the city of Flint can ill afford to switch courses at this point. You also said it is not financially prudent to spend $18 million to purchase water that meets the same DEQ standards as the water now available from the Flint River." Mr. Early, obviously, now we know that the water from the Flint River was not meeting the same standards as water coming from Detroit water. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And then, did you consider changing course at any point after serious concerns had been raised about the quality and safety of the river water?
Well, at the time that you referenced, we had already enlisted the aid of another water expert to determine exactly what the causes were. We were trying to diagnose the causes. Again, we were dealing with the issue of coliform, TTHM, E. coli, and other issues. We were not talking about lead at the time. The point is simply this: the city of Flint did not have the money.
Yeah, but sometimes, I mean, look, common sense should take over. The General Motors plant stopped using the water when it started to rust new parts. What would that tell? What would that tell the average person? That means they need to stop drinking it. I mean, come on, is that difficult to determine?
We continue to rely on the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality. And until such time as they deemed the water unsafe to drink, we were doing all that we could to manage the contamination and to also make the water accessible and potable.
After that January 15, 2015 letter, a few days later, the director of the Detroit water system sent you a letter offering to reconnect the city of Flint to the Detroit water supply. Why did you reject the director's offer?
I did not do that. I was gone from Flint. I had left Flint by that time that letter came out. That rejection was written by my successor. Again, there were 4 emergency managers during this period. That letter of rejection came from my successor.
Okay, and so it came down to you or your successor trying to save $18 million?
No, it came down to the fact that the city did not have $18 million. They were already paying some of the most exorbitant and the highest water rates in the country. We have litigation pending now from the customers who are fighting the rates for the water, even before the contamination issues.
Okay, going along with your line of thinking then, when do we say, okay, public health and safety matters, and it's the responsibility of the state of Michigan or the EPA to step in and say, we are endangering lives, we are damaging people for the rest of their lives. And when does that occur?
From day one, sir. From day one.
Yeah, but you didn't do it.
The issues of lead contamination came out in 2015. They came out after that. The issues we were dealing with in terms of contaminated water were the TTHMs, the E. coli, and the coliform materials that were found in the water. And that was a result of the distribution system age. It was a result of the number of water main breaks that we had at that particular time. I mean, this was a perfect storm for things to happen while we were switching from one water source to another. But we tried to manage those.
Well, I mean, but didn't common sense tell you what General Motors did when they changed the water system that they were using because it was rusting the parts? What did that say to you?
What we were told regarding that situation was because of the raw nature of the machined parts that General Motors was producing, the treatment materials we were putting in to treat the water was indeed having a negative impact on their products. But it did not correlate to a negative impact on consumption of the water, according to the MDEQ.
For the record, I have a letter in response signed by Darnell Early rejecting Detroit Water's offer to change back. So make this part of the record, too.
Without objection,
Chairman, I yield back.
And before the gentleman yields back, Mr. Edwards, I'll give you an opportunity to respond to this inquiry as well. Did you have something you wanted to, it sounded like you wanted to, okay. Gentleman yields back. I'm now actually recognized myself for 5 minutes. Ms. Hedman, when did you first know there was a problem about water in Flint?
The first time I was briefed was December of 2014. I was briefed on the TTHM issue, the disinfection byproduct issue. My staff have instructions that when there's a significant violation in a system to bring it to my attention, and they briefed me shortly before.
So you knew about it in 2014. When did you have your first conversation with Mayor Walling?
My first conversation about TTHM, about the disinfection byproducts, occurred in late February. He requested a drinking water expert in that area, and I supplied him with an expert from the EPA lab in Cincinnati.
So, Mr. Walling, you went on television in July of 2015 and told everybody that it was safe to drink the water. Did you just do that on your own, or who told you that that was a viable thing to say?
The MDEQ had repeatedly provided assurances. We heard over and over again in our technical advisory meetings, discussions with staff, that the water was meeting the standards, that it was safe to drink.
Did you have a discussion with the EPA?
Dr. Hedman and I spoke around that time after the Del Toro memo was provided
What did
to
she
media
say?
in Flint. And it was explained to me that that memo was under review, that the scope of the problem was being assessed. And my understanding at the time was this was limited to very particular cases, because